Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive, the podcast that skips small talk and goes straight for the concepts that shape our thinking and behavior. In this podcast, cold expertise is defenestrated as warm philosophy is enthroned in an attempt to explore the field in which we're all scientists looking for answers, living well.
Hello world, welcome to another episode of the Deep Dive with me, Eyal Shai. I'm joined today by Irene Jeka. Hi Irene.
Hi, Eyal. So finally we kind of get to talk.
Yes, finally. And without further ado, I'd like us to know what we're talking about. So would you please?
Well, of course, we are going to talk about a lot other things, but I think a main theme of our conversation is going to be around kindness. And so we are going to kind of dive into the world of kindness.
Beautiful, beautiful. Looking forward to it. So let's go for it. And if you don't mind telling us what was the first moment for you that you can remember thinking about kindness, or even before it was an explicit search, what are some of the thoughts you had to do with kindness, even as a child, if that's the case?
That's a very interesting question. In fact, as I was reflecting and trying to prepare myself for the podcast, when the word kindness comes to my mind, the first thing that comes to my mind is my mother. And it all goes back to, of course, childhood. So to give a little bit background about myself, I am basically from India and my parents are kind of there. They are from very humble background. My mother was a teacher. My father is a social worker. So I come from a household where kindness was a way of life. And as I was growing up, I saw my mother basically embody kindness in the most wonderful way, be it the way she used to kind of handle us as children, as a teacher, as just a community member. She was always there trying to do her bit in whatever way she could. So that's where the journey kind of started. I mean, as a child, of course, I didn't really, for me, it was okay. I always thought that, okay, since my mom was a teacher, probably that's what they do. They are there for the students, and you kind of, it cascades into all parts of life. But as I grew up, and especially in my 30s is when I kind of started really bonding with the whole word kindness and trying to really dive into it.
Wonderful. So one question that comes to my mind is, you describe pretty much an ideal childhood, at least in terms of your mother being there for you with all her heart and mind. Is there a point in making a distinction between kindness and love in that sense? I'm wondering, because we're talking about kindness, so to try and kind of distinguish this concept from related concepts.
Well, let me correct you. I would say I had an ideal childhood, in the sense, of course, as growing up, there was always constant conflict in terms of, seeing, or rather, I would say, wanting the kind of attention that I saw my mother kind of sharing with everybody for myself. So I also had those, moments of insecurity, but probably because I didn't understand it too well, what it was. So, I mean, as a child, that was always on, hovering in my mind. But when you coming back to your question, in terms of kindness and love, I think I would say love. I mean, love is where you start with, and kindness is basically a form of love, or rather, a action that converts into action. So you start with love and understanding. Of course, when we talk about kindness, there's so many different shades of character and emotions that are associated with kindness. But of course, it starts with love for some people, but it may not necessarily need you to be kind. You don't really need to love someone. It's basically trying to relate and understand what is that you can do for the other person, materially, or maybe just being there for somebody.
So love is more like an emotional background to kindness, which is more to do with pragmatic behavior of people towards other people, as in actually doing good for the people that you love. That's being kind to them, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. And as I think about the question more, it is also, I would say, love for just us as human beings, the whole thread that connects us, the interdependence, the interconnectedness that is there. So seeing, not okay, it's not that Irene sees Ayal as a different, okay, you are at a different location, or a different, you come from a different family. It's just seeing Ayal as another human who's just like me. So that's where I see the love comes in.
Beautiful. Yeah, so I'm interested in going forward in time. Let's say you're discussing this in childhood. Is there anything that you experienced, and I'm pretty sure there is, we all had those experiences, but maybe a salient moment where you perceived a total lack of kindness, and what kind of impression that left on you? Did it help you form a better idea of what you want yourself to be like growing up?
Yeah, in terms of lack of kindness, probably I wouldn't say lack of kindness, but as I was growing up, I would say I was a very quiet and shy kid. So somehow I missed having those close group of friends. Of course, I have a lot of friends, and if my friends ever listen, no, I really have some good friends, but I somehow missed, I would say, yeah, a little bit of kindness from during school, I would say. So
Did that leave a mark in the sense that you somehow promised, like you took it in as a guiding light in your attempt to be the kind of person that you want to be? So did it make you decide going forward that you are going to be kind, or put more emphasis on seeing other people?
yes, I think the the part where I would say, when you're not seen or when you're invisible. And in school, I felt, I mean, at that point, of course, there were multiple reasons at play, because of the fact that probably I felt what I felt. Uh, but I think that was a turning point for me to kind of really realize that, okay, tomorrow when I have conversations with people, or be it in my personal life or be it in my professional life, I had to make it a point that, okay, I would ensure that whenever I meet someone, they are seen, even if I meet them for a couple of minutes. I try to do that, but of course, I'm human. I also miss. There are instances when I would not have been able to meet what I had set out for myself. But yeah, I'm learning. It's all evolving.
Right. So I'm gonna let you take the liberty now to take us to a time in your life where you feel this concept is becoming more central to you. What are your thoughts on it? What is your journey in terms of trying to really think about it, or go finding what it means with other people?
Yeah. In fact, I would like to share, one instance or one story that really impacted my life a lot. And that kind of firmed up my whole affinity towards kindness, or trying to amplify the voice of kindness in my own way. This goes back to about I was in my late 20s, coming out of a bad marriage, going through a very messy divorce, a sad divorce. And it was like almost restarting. I had to restart my life because I had to really literally restart all over again. That part, or that phase in life, is when I experienced the most amazing acts of kindness through my colleagues, or my bosses who were working with me, through random people who really helped me uh, to kind of find myself, airport conversations with strangers. And I can't really name one person, but it was like an army of people that you suddenly meet, and you kind of start believing in that, okay, there's a higher, power, or, okay, there is kindness is not, there's a lot more kindness in the world. And so that phase in life was when I kind of really experienced a lot of kindness, and it helped me overcome my personal trauma, and heal a bit. So that's when I said, okay, I need to kind of start doing something. But of course, life took its turn. Things didn't really, I got uh, busy in work, and I didn't do anything about it till about last year in the pandemic, when I think many of us found ourselves in different places doing different things. That's when I started this whole initiative, which I call the Gentle Project. And it started as an initiative where I wanted to just amplify the voice of kindness. But I also had some conflicts, which we'll talk later in terms of the whole concept. So I started with writing blogs and just trying to research, okay, what is the how did, why is it that people think that there's not much of kindness today, especially when it comes to the corporate world, or even we see it in the online cyberspace also. And so I started writing. Then I said, okay, let me start a podcast. And I was able to kind of meet 30 people. I've kind of finished 30 episodes. I'm right now on a break from the podcast, because I'm sure you know that
It's hard work.
recording, it's hard work. It's a lot of hard work. So, and plus for the fact that it was just me that was doing everything. And it became a little bit difficult to kind of manage everything. But the best part is I met up these amazing people, and I kept at it, sharing thoughts, and basically these podcasts with people. And now when I've taken a break, I see people coming and asking me, okay, where are you? And I see friends and even colleagues associating kindness with the Gentle Project. And I've got people reach out to me, and they have shared that, okay, when we actually, they take a moment to think that, okay, can I be kind? So I was like, okay, there goes the first small micro impacts that I've seen. But that being said, I also wanted to kind of do something more apart from just sharing podcasts. So during the course of the last 1 year, with whatever little funds I had, we managed to help different projects, different causes, be it sponsoring some books for a library in Ghana through this young entrepreneur that I met on the podcast, or raising funds for children in education, or sponsoring laptops for people who didn't have the resources. So those were the small other impact that kind of got associated through the Gentle Project. And so now I've taken a pause to kind of really re-look and revisit and try to evaluate how can I go ahead in a more thoughtful and meaningful way, where we are able to kind of impact, even if it's like one life at a time, really spread out the message that yeah, you just need to be kind, even if you don't agree, or just the kind life, living the kind life.
No, that's amazing, and I think it reflects perfectly the insight that we arrived at before, that kindness is about doing things, because it's not just amplifying in words the idea of kindness, but actually going out there and being an activist and looking after people who are in need of help right now, which is basically you're doing unto others the way others have done unto you, right? When you were in a time of crisis. I can relate to that immensely. Me growing up, losing my mother at a young age, and really cherishing the people who have been there, who were kind to really look at me and see what's going on. It was hard because I was a very protected person, like reserved. I wasn't really letting many people in on what was going on with me. But even later in life, as I went to university and started taking ancient Greek lessons, and meeting my ancient Greek teacher outside class hours and doing philosophy and doing dialectic, that is one of the kindest things that I've had done unto me. So thanks, Ivor, if you're listening. And I think you're right. It's about doing something for somebody without any sort of expectation for getting something in return. And it really strengthens relationship in a way that no other things do. And I'm also wondering about, you mentioned a decline in current social climate in kindness. And do you think that has to do with the fact that we are largely not encouraged to share anything personal with other people, and we are more interesting as people to do business with, rather as whole persons complete with emotions, hardships, and so on?
It's a very interesting question. In fact, this takes me back to one of the guests that I had on my podcast. Her name was Donna Cameron, and she was the author of Living a Year Kindly. And she talked about how the whole narrative, like if you look at the early, like maybe 1980s and 1990s, the narrative was around really aggressive. You really need to be aggressive. Kindness was almost seen as a weakness. And even now, it kind of really, when people talk about kindness, they think that, okay, if you're too kind, then you'd be seen as too weak, or too nice. So there's a lot of blurred meanings around the whole thing. But she spoke about how the narrative was that time. People were kind of really encouraged to be competitive. You lived in a dog eat dog world, and how that has kind of passed on. We are carrying those burdens, but of course, our world has evolved. There's a lot of progress. Yeah, I mean, as is with any era, we also have our own challenges. So somehow I feel that narrative that we grew up with, that you really need to be tough and you really need to be competitive, somehow has kind of, you know, made people develop more of shields where we really shield. Probably, I'm in my 1 year journey, what I've seen is that, or what I have discovered is that generally people are kind, with, of course, very few exceptions, but generally people are kind. And, but what we see in the online world, the cyberspace, is just a very small part. And we can't forget of the fact that not everybody is online. It's just a small percentage of people who are probably active on Twitter or other social media. But if we actually go out in the larger world, people are generally kind. And but that being said, probably to answer your question, yes, maybe we just feel comfortable to project ourselves as more strong. And yeah, that's how we voice our opinions, or it helps us build a so-called brand sometimes, so that's what I think. But also, we also live in a world where there are people, when you talk about kindness, one person really comes to my mind on the cyberspace is Visa. He keeps talking about it. There are people like him also who actually really give you that feeling that, okay, the warm, and yeah, they're here too. So we have those kinds of differences and commonalities. I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah, there's too many thoughts in me running on this question specifically.
No, you haven't. I'm really happy. I mean, the general tendency is for a lot of people to say, how today everything is the worst it's ever been today. And I'm actually glad to hear you saying that. Yeah, I think two or three decades before, things were even harsher on people. And I was pleasantly surprised on Twitter too, how many people are actually kind on Twitter too. So you can actually build a fairly strong hedge to keep out animosity and things like that. You just have to work a little bit to do it and never be tempted to start an argument on there. Now, it's interesting. It makes me think about why people would not show kindness. And I think it's partly on all of us to be more vulnerable, because the situation you're describing, for example, after going through a divorce and having to restart your life, you had to be honest and vulnerable enough to let people know that this is the case, and that gave them a chance to be kind to you. I think that psychologically there's a tendency to for a lot of people to become out of touch with themselves and base their own image of themselves through others. And now, if you're going to go down that path, then you better show others that you are successful, that you are not going through hardship or something like that, because then what's going to be reflected from them is that this is the way you are. But of course, at certain times of the day, of the week, of the year, you're going to start and feel the truth. And I think you might feel conflicted with yourself. And people will not know that you are in need of kindness, because that's not what you've projected. So I think there's a lot to be said for vulnerability and being vulnerable when you are. I mean, just be more truthful about the hardships we're going through.
Absolutely. And another thing around kindness is also kindness towards self, because more often than not, we often are not very kind to ourselves. We are, at least a lot of women I know, we are very self-critical. always some people have this imposter syndrome, which kind of this we aren't very kind to, we are very quick to judge ourselves. And kindness, when you talk about kindness, it's also about leaving aside your judgment, giving people, being curious about people, trying to understand what is it, giving people the benefit of doubt at times. So kindness is also about being kind to yourself. I think that is one of the essential parts of the whole thing, because without that, how can you expect to be kind to somebody else? Because so that's very important. And as you say, the whole psychological factor, being vulnerable and being able to share yourself is very important. And being kind to yourself also helps kind of take on that journey.
So what does being kind to yourself entail in your eyes? Can you share something that you are doing that is a practice of being kind to yourself?
So I'm still learning, and but I think in the past 1 year, I would say I've made a lot of progress in terms of being kind to myself. So generally, the most important thing or practice I try to do is not try to immediately arrive at a decision that this is good or this is bad when I'm doing something, or be it and through an action or something that I was expecting of myself where I didn't meet. I try to kind of pause and take a moment to really not get into judgment quickly, because our minds are like, these really, it's like almost like courts where you have multiple lawyers and judges sitting and saying, okay, this is right, wrong. So I try to take that moment to not judge, understand what it is. And if I have kind of not met my own expectation, I say, okay, don't worry, there'll be a next time, we'll do better. So that's how I deal with it. And yeah, so that is one of the primary practices that I do. And I also kind of I've given a name to my own inner voice. I call my inner voice Alice, and that conversation or that monologue is what kind of helps really being kind to myself, because it's all about the conversation within yourself that you have, where you are judging or kind of chiding yourself. So that's where I forgive myself. When I make errors, I try to forgive myself. Or for example, the gentle project, the long break, the break that was intended for a month has now extended to for about 3 months. So I had two options. One is that, okay, I say that, okay, this is really not done, and really sulk, saying that, okay, I've really failed and gentle project is going to be forgotten, and it's another unfinished project. But I say that, okay, now it's time, we will restart it. What is the plan? What is the best that I can do, and how do I move forward? So that's a practical example of what I think of how I have been kind to myself in real life situations.
Now that's such an apt reminder, because I myself, just as we're recording this, in the past few days, I'm like questioning so many things that I've been doing in the past year or so, trying to really pursue a path of self-expression and doing that. And as if I didn't feel bad enough about, maybe in my mind, not too many things materializing into things that I can kind of show that I've done, that I can say I've completed. And then I watched a section of Bill Maher's show, Real Time, where he just goes really hard after millennials and Gen Zers for just being these people who are obsessed with self-expression and not wanting to do any work. And it like hit me really hard. So it's really good. I'm coming across your technique for self-kindness, and I'm going to apply something for that, and also remind myself that that's okay if nothing gets to be the way I wanted it exactly. There's still a long life ahead of me, and it's if anything, it's good that I went for it, you know, even if it turns out that no, I'm probably not the most talented person out there, or the most hardworking person out there, because it's always easy to see these larger than life figures of people who achieve so much, you know, are doing something with their lives. Um, I'm also trying to remind myself that they probably could use a bit of kindness, because what for everything that they achieve, they probably do through some sort of compulsion from being inadequate themselves. So I always try to remind that it's not a bad thing if I was unable to accomplish as much as I wanted because I got distracted playing with my daughter. Like, that's actually probably a good thing that I'm able to be distracted, you know? So that's very interesting. And thank you for the reminder at this point in time.
No, absolutely. In fact, I was also going through conflicts in terms of what is the future of Gen project and when it comes to impact. But then I'm taking a course which is called the path towards the path of moral leadership. It's an Acumen, and there the founder of Acumen, Jacqueline, she talks about something, leaving the world a little bit better than you found it. So that kind of really helped me settle all the storm that was going around the whole initiative. And I was like, and even when I started General Project, I was very clear that it is something that I am really passionate about. And I've seen in workplaces, especially since I was just transitioning from a corporate life to life of a nomad and a freelancer. So it really stuck with me that okay, it is specifically to really amplify the voice of kindness, and that's about it. I didn't aspire that okay, I'm going to hit the top podcast, top 10 podcasts. That was never my intention. And I really enjoyed when there were people who really, even though it wasn't thousands of people who listened to it, even if there were 50 people who kind of listened to it, and when I saw the stats, I was like, okay, somebody will remember something that they would have listened on the podcast. And it was fun, the way it was going. Of course, there were moments of that when I used to compare, okay, it really, nobody, it's not really picking up, or am I doing it right, or should I be really promoting a lot? But then I saw the kind of effects of people really reaching out or people talking about it. Then I was like, okay, and this is just 30 episodes, so it'll probably take 1,000 episodes to even really more people to relate to the General Project and what it is about. But then, yeah, I think we've had this discussion that we are so different and that's just not us. So I was like, okay, let's just run how the way it's supposed to run, and that defines what I am. So I get completely what the whole feeling is.
Yeah, and I think it's probably pretty good not to become too big or have like something achieve success in the sense that we use it of like popularity or something, because I think when you have a small podcast and one person says, man, I love this episode that I listened to, you're like, that's great. So I think when the podcast is small, few people reach out and it's all positive, right? I think later on, if you become famous, I don't think that'll ever happen, or for me, but if that happens, I think the negative remarks start pouring in with a lot more power, than you have to face that. I don't know why, but I guess for people with a high public profile, there was an amazing Tim Ferriss blog on a blog post on why you shouldn't become famous, why it's not something to aspire to. So he shares a lot of the hardship, and it's truly hardship of being famous. But I think you mentioned some sort of conflict before, as you were saying, and you were saying that it's something that we're gonna get back to, and I'm intrigued to hear what you have in mind there when you mentioned conflict in the context of kindness.
Yeah. So as I was kind of really after a year, it's been a year for my podcast. I also kind of feared that I didn't want to be really virtue signaling and just being all, about kindness. And so the conflict was that how do I really talk about kindness? Because personally, it really matters to me. And I've seen how a kind word, just a kind nudge from a coworker can really help somebody or really make somebody's day. So my conflict was around how do I spread this, message or talk about kindness without being too holier than thou, okay, kind of, situation where, because it's a very topic that is talked about uh, by more and enough people, but yet how do I really make it more relatable? So that was the whole conflict that I have been undergoing. But then, as I said, there are small sources. I have a very non-active Facebook page that I created, and I haven't posted there for a good 3-4 months. It's still not my cup of tea. And just last week, I saw some activity on the page. So, those are small signs that I get. Okay, there's something that resonated with somebody who has read something. Probably I would have written or posted something around the whole topic of kindness. And then that kind of, has pushed me to think or narrow down in terms of, okay, maybe, yes, I am going to talk about kindness, but then can I pick up one group that I can work with more closely, where I'm able to really help somebody or just enable the whole, uh, maybe do something for somebody in my way. Of course, right now it's more limited in terms of the projects that I sponsor or small donations that I made. But I wanted to really make it more personal and see how I can engage. So I've been thinking of working with women, specifically to start with, probably women who are on a career break or women who are trying to find themselves or discover themselves after uh, parenting kids, with grown-up kids. Women generally are at a stage where the kids have gone to college or school, and they have that time. So that's something that I've been kind of that's going on in my mind, but I need to figure out on how. And so that's the whole conflict that has been really keeping me awake.
That's really interesting. I mean, thinking about, what are some actionable things, because you're a woman of action, as we've already established, and that's interesting. That's something that I have to kind of run through my mind. The way you can really perpetuate the things in substance and not just in words. And it's fascinating in terms of other real life, I don't know if to call them tips or something close to that, but are there practices that you've adopted in general when meeting people, colleagues, co-workers, small things that even if you don't meet a person who's vulnerable and sharing with you that there is really an opportunity here to go an extra mile to be kind to that person. But I'm assuming there are small things that we can do for just about anyone we meet. Have you found a few of these yourself, or maybe from guests of the podcast that you'd like to share?
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is just listening. Listening. So if when either meeting online, offline, just deep listening, I think that will open up insights in terms of what is the other person facing, or is there something that you can actually do. So listening will open up pathways to identifying, and through listening you can observe, okay, the body language, or if a person is in a stress, just listening and hearing out will really help you identify what you can do. And I was watching this amazing series that Tanya suggested on Netflix. It's called The Midnight Gospel. And I can't quite remember what was that phrase, but in one of the episodes, they say that listening is like deep sonar, this thing where you kind of catch on, to waves from people, and it can really, so it's like that. Listening really open. That's personally how I have been able to practice a little bit of kindness in my life, and when I meet people, or when I was leading teams, specifically in my working life. It's always about, okay, trying to see what that other person needs. And sometimes, more often than not, it's not that people just need somebody just to hear them out, or to be there to just share a smile, or just nudge people, okay, you can do it. That small word of encouragement, or if you're out in a community, holding the door, or offering to pick up groceries, or just going and just talking to people, just saying a hello, and smiling, or thanking your postman who probably you don't see, but when you meet that person, or your gardener, if you live in a community like mine. So those are the small things, and it's not about the grand things that people really need. It is about tiniest things that matter, and that can make somebody's day really bright. And that's what I have experienced, and I have tried to, especially in life, and whenever I try to meet people. Of course, I really enjoy one-on-one conversations more than group this thing. So yeah, for me, listening is the biggest piece of the whole act. But there are 100 ways to be kind. There are more than enough ways to be kind, materially, non-materially, just listening in your personal relationships, not judging, giving people the benefit of doubt, trying to see what they want, and also having courage. Very important thing. Sometimes it also takes courage to be kind, or just to go out and just offer your help to somebody. Sometimes we hesitate because of the fact that we think, okay, what is the other person going to think, or maybe it's not needed.
I think listening is such a fine answer. It first of all makes me want to do an episode on listening. I find it a fascinating concept, and also I love it because then it turns out that the act that you do to find out in what way you can be kind is a kind act in itself.
Yes.
And listening there's something so special about it. I remember the first times in my life where I could really listen, which is really interesting. So I've always had like a mind that's racing, about things. And like a lot of people in many discussions that I had, the thing that would go through my head is what I'm going to say next, right? And then it was only after starting to do dialectic with Ivor, that something changed and I wasn't interrupting myself anymore. I wasn't perturbed myself. And when you're not perturbed, you can actually take in what the other person is saying. And it was a noticeable change and so pleasant, first and foremost, because I was not perturbed anymore. And I realized that if I take the time to listen, to really listen to the person in front of me, I don't have to deal with myself, which is great. I don't have to get myself in the picture, and I'm much better able to really ask the right question. Ask a question instead of spewing out this thing that you've now been thinking about as the other person was sharing something about themselves that's important. And if you're not listening, all you're doing then is thinking about saying the thing that would make you feel better somehow. So I love listening. I love your answer that listening is probably the first act of kindness that we can do, because you don't actually have to assume anything about the other person. You just listen. And I love the way that you mentioned that it's also about looking at body language and something like that, because trusting that is very important. A lot of the people would not give it straight out as in a verbal response, like what's on their mind or heavy on their heart or something like that. So I really, really like it.
Yeah, and of course, I can't help mentioning the Interintellect community. I mean, one thing that the whole community, really emits a very kind vibe is because of the fact that in the salons, people listen. I think uh, that's really, that kind of really also impacted my journey in terms of really healing in a way, where small parts through some of the salons where really I was patching up few things that were open, and they were like, of course now I know people, but those were the initial days, and they were like, we were still strangers that time, and probably they don't know, but there are people who have reached out or shared a kind comment. Some of when I was really having a bad day, and those are the things that really help us walk a journey together.
Yeah, for sure. And I think those are one of those things. So first of all, yes, I also give this spiel about the Interintellect people I made. I definitely think it's a special community. And from the first salon that I attended, there was nothing but generosity and kindness from people I followed up with after the salon. So I'll link to that in the show notes. Yeah, and just generally, I think that maybe this is what you mean when you say there are these, and maybe it's just the lack of tools in the 80s and 90s that were maybe were harsher, but I think it's such a blessing today that any of us can go online, and it's important that we know that there are people out there that are willing to be vulnerable or willing to be kind, and anything bad can certainly be found online, but there's a lot to be said for global communities online. They also allow people a sort of sanctuary, maybe to go and be something very different from who they are in real life, in societies that don't accept them or don't want to hear that they're doing badly today or generally.
Yeah, in fact, another thing that came to my mind was that uh, now that we are living in a society or community where technology is such an intrinsic part of our lives, and the language with which we communicate online, especially for the younger generations, I feel, at least, also a small reason of the Gentle Project was to enable kids to have, really see kindness in action, especially in the way languages, and there's a lot of online bullying also that happens. Kids these days, youngsters, they have immense pressure, to peer pressure to create it through Instagram, the whole lives that you see on Instagram. So I feel probably through the tiles kind of need to be a little bit more balanced. You see a lot more of bullying or things that really impact teenagers and young kids. So we need equal voices, like let's say the Good Project, or there's the Kind Lab. There are many such this thing, but we are still very small as comparison, to kind of really spread that impact. So yeah, so as you were talking, that came to my mind, that leaving a more kinder world for the next generation is really, as adults, and as someday we'll become ancestors, I think they will probably need more stories of kindness that they can take forward. And like for example, when I was doing the research on kindness, and I found so many stories of kindness around World War II, during pandemics, during adversities, where people were really helping out each other, despite the fact that they were also in the same situation, facing the same kind of challenges. So similarly, hoping that the next generation will also look up to our generation, saying that, okay, that there are stories and acts of kindness that we can remember fondly.
Yeah, for sure. And I like how you kind of put the responsibility on our shoulders, because it's true. We're there. Sometimes we forget that it's there, but it is our responsibility. Like I see it with my daughter now, it's really my responsibility to let her unfold into a person that's kind, and to that she literally copies my behavior. So documenting things, like you say, is so important. I live in Israel, and there's Yad Vashem. It's the Holocaust Museum in Israel. Really heavy place, of course, as can be expected. But I think maybe one of the best exhibits in it is the files of the people who have helped others during the war. These people, and I forget what the term is in English for somebody who has helped saving Jews or other people. But to get the certificate that you were one of these people, you would have had to actually put your life in danger. And many people did. Many people put their life in danger to save strangers just because they saw it's the right thing. And it also connects me with a thought that just popped in my mind. And I'm a language person, and I would do an etymology research before like when I come across a word, I would immediately look for the etymology, because I can discover so much about where it comes from. So I hope I'm not misleading listeners when I say this, but I am pretty certain that kindness is, has to do with kin, and to be of the same kind. And that's something that needs to be kept in mind as we discuss kindness, is that it's all about seeing how we are of the same kind as the person that we're dealing with, finding what's common to both of us, and realizing that at times we are all suffering pain or anything like that. And even though it could be you today and not me, like I better take measures to help you, to help lift you, because it's going to be me the next time, who's going to suffer from something. And I really like that connection now that I think of it. And sometimes I think it's forgotten about the actual word and its origin, to find connection with people who are of your kind and of your kin. and also treat people who are not related to you as if they were of your kin and family, so it's just a thought.
No, that's right. I mean, you got it right. It's related to kin and nations, and that's how the whole thing. And yeah, of course, uh, there is this beautiful quote by Carl Sagan which says, "Let us temper our criticism with kindness. None of us comes fully equipped." So I think we need that.
Absolutely, and I love the fact that you brought a quote from a scientist out of all the people, a scientist, a popularizer of science, a person who could not be suspected as somebody who does not use reason or something like that. I think that a lot of people think that being rational means being cold or something like that, and this is not at all the case. So I also think it's super relevant to our times, because a lot of people do tend to be not kind enough if they perceive that they are on the right side of some sort of debate. And this is something I'm also thinking a lot about lately, is how to stay kind despite the fact that there are many forces pulling us apart, be it something divisive like Donald Trump being elected, or now with coronavirus. I see a lot of people basically drifting apart from one another because of these external factors. And I think it's our duty to pull it back in, to be able to listen, like we said, to people from both sides, and never, never, ever let us be on a different side than them. I don't think that there are different sides to it, really. Again, kindness, we're all people, and if we're seeing ourselves kind of because of our thoughts or beliefs are drawn into a place of being from the other side of some metaphorical fence, we better for that moment not be so not insist on staying on the side of right, and instead choosing to be on the same side of being kind to one another. So
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it doesn't mean that one can still hold a opinion and can agree to disagree, but that doesn't mean that you go and pull out all your guns and start pulling or trolling people. I think there's always a way of healthy and kind engagement that can happen. So yeah, so that, and it's all about just understanding that at the end of the day, it's just another human being who has been conditioned or probably comes from a different background, different school of thought, and which is why sometimes they have differences of or totally different view. And that's something that I also saw in so many philosophers while they spoke about so many different things, be it focusing on will, reason, intellect, or each philosopher. But most of them like spoke about kindness, at least towards the end of their lives. So yeah, it's not difficult. I mean, a little bit of empathy and empathy in action, with good listening, just being there for people.
yeah, you're so right saying about trying to always think about this person who is talking to me might not share a belief with me. They might be doing that, and again it goes back to kind of looking at what's there apart from the words. Like you say, there's a whole person with a history, with fears. What I find a lot of the time is that people who are And in these days, it's so understandable. Like, we are bombarded with things that are not right, pandemic, other things, and people will get livid talking about things, and get excited. And I find that recently I'm really consciously trying to adopt a method of really separating what I'm feeling toward the words, and also realizing that under the tip of the iceberg, there's a whole person who's right now signaling to me that they're in distress, and the best thing that I could do is not appeal or not relate directly to the words coming out of their mouth and see how they hit me, and now how I feel bad because of how it hit me, or something like that. It's so important to keep in mind that it's just as true that I am now a person coming in contact with somebody who's in distress, and what can I do to do that? We'll deal with everything that comes out as words and beliefs and disagreements. We can deal with that later, but right now I want you to not be as distressed as you are, and myself not to get distressed. So let's sort out this thing that's between us. Let's get to a point where first we talk to each other in our normal voices and with kindness in our voice, and where the goodwill is apparent, that we both care for one another and people. And let's sort out the arguments that we have in words later, which they need to be sorted out, but it's not the time to do it when we're both in distress. And I think that is such an important thing to remember. I think it connects with, it's also an instance of being kind.
Yes. I mean, yeah. So generally at home, when I see my husband kind of really getting agitated on somebody over a call, the first thing I tell him that, okay, try to think from that person's point of view. And it's a platitude saying that you have to be in somebody else's shoe to understand, but do we really do that? So that's also leave food for thought. When it comes in action, not all the time it's possible. Even as humans, it is kind of definitely not possible to be have the kind mode always. Yeah, there will be times when, yeah, it's part of life and the part of what we are. So it's very interesting. And of course, right now there's a lot of research that is going around kindness. A lot of universities suddenly have taken a lot of interest. There's a lot of research that is going on how actually it can improve, lead better lives. And of course, the scientific impact of kind acts is there. You really feel happy and all. But I also wanted to share a very interesting insight that I saw, kind of came across. So apparently, there were some studies that were done by a group of I don't quite remember, but I'll probably share that link with you so that you can put it in the show notes if required.
Great.
So yeah, everyday kindness is aspirational. Yes, it is something that we pursue, but studies have shown that if you really mark your day in a week, let's say you mark one day and you decide that, okay, today, even if it's 5 acts of kindness, I'm going to focus on kind of working or just doing going about doing acts of kindness. That impact on the overall well-being has been much higher. So I found that very interesting, because here we are talking also about living the kind life, generally being kind every day. I know every day is, I'll be honest, I also understand it might not be possible for somebody to be kind 24/7, but even if it is like 10 hours, 12 hours a day, that's a good start, or even 5 minutes a day, it's a good
That's
start.
really good. Yeah, a lot of people can't manage half an hour.
Yes, yes. So yeah, just so that was a very interesting, that marking people who have challenges with the whole concept of kindness, they can start with one day where they try and then see how it goes, and it really helps. Apparently, studies have shown that it has helped people improve their mental well-being, contributed to their overall mental health, and generally help them maintain a good state of mind.
Wonderful. Yeah, and there's also the practice of metta with 2 T's, metta meditation, which is basically sending loving kindness to everyone. I think one of the exercises in that is actually think of the person you actually usually hate the most, and even practice sending kindness to them, kind of picturing them at their best when they're flourishing, without the kind of background maladies that cause them to be the kind of person that they are. And I never know if when you do that you're supposed to include psychopaths or not. I don't know. Still debating on that with myself. But yeah, there are definitely practices that are becoming popular with kind of nurturing this attitude of kindness toward the world. Is there anything that we left out, that we have not touched upon enough?
No, I think we've spoken at length on different this thing. But of course, the science of kindness, I mean, that is very easily accessible and people can find about that. But the whole thing is that I think the one thing that I want to leave the podcast with is to just celebrate our own existence, our shared existence, our interconnectedness, and just be kind in whatever way works for you. Be your own kind of kind. It doesn't have to fit into standards or to-dos that to be kind you have to be so and so. We all are different. We all have our different languages of expression or acts of kindness that are different for each person. So just find out what works for you and just do that. And yeah, I believe it's a lifelong journey. And yeah, so wish you, whoever is listening, thank you for listening, and hope you have a really kind life and stay kind.
That is such a beautiful message, and thank you for getting it out there. If you want to now fill us in on the details on where to hear more from you or more about the Gentle Project, you're more than welcome to share it with us.
Sure. I'm available on Twitter at Irene, Jeka, and the Gentle Project podcast is available on all your channels wherever you get podcasts. It's called the Gentle Project, all about kindness, and we also have a website which is needs a lot of work, but it's called thegentleproject.io. And yeah, I'm always reachable on Twitter, mostly lurking around, even though might not be active.
Because that's what being kind on Twitter usually is. It's just staying quiet. This has been such a lovely episode. I loved every moment of it. And thank you so much for taking the time to spread kindness. And I hope that our listeners will take some of it into their mind and heart so that this keeps rolling. So thank you so much, Irene, again.
Thank you so much, Rhea. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye-bye.